We're joined now by NBC News senior White House correspondent Garrett Haake. Garrett, what do we know about plans to downsize at DOD?
A lot of things going on here simultaneously, Anna, which all have the net effect of trying to, as you say, downsize and reshape the Pentagon first. The staffers from DOJ are now inside the Pentagon looking through their budgets, looking through where costs are, looking at what headcounts are, as we've seen them do at other agencies. They will meet an ideologically willing Secretary of Defense in Pete Hegseth, who announced yesterday that he wants senior leadership there at the Department of Defense to try to find about 8% of their budget they can cut, $50 billion or so, to try to redirect into other programs. It's not clear legally if that can be done, but he wants to try to move priorities from one part of the Pentagon budget essentially to others that he believes are more in line with the Trump administration's goals. And on that end, 5 sources tell us, he also intends to fire, perhaps as early as this week, some senior officials, generals, senior officers either closely associated with Lloyd Austin, his predecessor in the Biden administration, or who backed priorities that don't align with the Trump administration. So a lot of shakeups happening potentially at the Pentagon. By the way, as congressional Republicans are still pushing to spend an additional $150 billion with a B on the defense budget next year. So not in alignment here across the Republican Party or the government.
Separately, we've heard Elon Musk sort of throw around ideas like sending checks directly to Americans with some of the DOJ savings. And now President Trump is apparently on board.
Yeah, look, this is another kind of indicator of how ad hoc this process has been. The president embracing this concept last night, suggesting that perhaps 20% of the money saved by DOJ could be sent back to the American people. Another 20% could go directly towards paying down the debt. Those aren't decisions that a president can make unilaterally. It would take an act of Congress to do so. And by the way, we're not exactly talking about huge pots of money here. Even if you take DOJ at their upper end estimates of how much money they have found and saved, you're talking about maybe $30 a person to the American taxpayer. If you take it at the lower end, about $2 billion of savings, which some media organizations have done, you're talking about a little over $1. So, don't go spending it all in one place, at least not yet, Anna.
What can you buy for $1 these days? Garrett Haake, thanks so much. Let's discuss now with 2 MSNBC political analysts, Democratic strategist Basil Smikle and Republican strategist Susan Del Percio. Basil, this idea for DOJ checks, 20% to Americans, 20%, going back into, I guess, paying up the deficit. Mm-hmm. We don't know where the 60% that's left is going to end up. But is this a workable idea?
Well, he thinks it's a workable idea. And one of the reasons I imagine that he does is because if you remember COVID and the stimulus checks, it was an act of Congress, but there was a path for him to sort of claim credit for it.
He wrote his name on those checks. He wrote his name
on it. And so for Donald Trump and his ardent supporters, they'll say, my gosh, look what the president did for me. But in reality, when you take all of these cuts, by the way, under consideration, my sense is that the net effect for the American voter is that they're going to see their life change substantially. And so even if whether it's $1 or $5, because $5,000, that certainly makes a difference. But $1, $5, $30, that doesn't, to me, add up to a net benefit for Americans overall when they look at what it took for them to get that check.
Susan, what about what's happening inside the Pentagon in this reporting about downsizing potentially there? We've heard for years from people like Bernie Sanders, progressives, that, there should be ways to maybe cut back some of that defense spending. But are Republicans going to go along with it if it's coming from President Trump and DOJ?
They will go along with it because they don't have to make the decision. They don't have to take a vote on it. So they have no problem if the Secretary of Defense is willing to cut his own budget. And that's, in fact, why you see so many Republicans being so quiet about it. Because if they did have to take a vote on it, that would be a different story. But to Basil's point, and especially you look at Department of Defense, people's lives are affected when they do get a $100 check back. And that does resonate. But people's lives are also affected when all of a sudden they find out we're not as strong military as we thought we were. And when they're in towns that has military bases and people are being let go, because let's not forget, it's just not a base that closes, for example. It's the deli, it's the dry cleaner, it's all the businesses around that. So elected officials, Democrats especially, if they really want to show the effects of potential cuts, they have to go back to their districts and make it clear. Now, the thing about the cutting generals and others in leadership. The problem there is what they're putting it on is that a lot of these folks followed DEI policies by the previous administration. They were following their orders. These are people in the chain of command. They follow the chief executive officer. So or the president, I should say, when the president says it's time to do this, the military follows. As long as it's legal.
Yeah, the commander-in-chief who's telling them.
Exactly. So it shouldn't be surprising. But again, Hegseth is showing once again he has no command of what the department does. Department of Defense does. He's just carrying out Donald Trump's wishes.
I mean, we were talking about how it's hard to kind of keep up with all the actions that are happening, and we know DOGE has been in tons of different departments. They've been responsible behind firings and layoffs of hundreds, thousands, maybe tens of thousands of employees. Again, it's hard to fully wrap your head around, but consider this. When we hear from President Trump what he says they've accomplished in DOGE savings through these actions so far. Watch.
In less than a single month, the Department of Government Efficiency has already saved over this is just a short period of time, $55 billion. And we're just getting started. That's nothing compared to the numbers that you're talking about, right?
We don't know where he got that $55 billion number, partly because DOGE has, posted some inaccurate savings on its website. Regardless, that sum is very far from the goal of $1 trillion in savings. And take a look at this chart, because up until this point, the areas that they're focusing on make up less than a quarter of the budget. That orange part there on the chart. Trump says he'll balance the budget, but his proposed tax cuts would put the U.S. another $5 trillion in the hole. So the only way you're going to reach that goal is by significantly carving into these other slices: Social Security, Medicare, military spending. Susan, something's got to give.
Not really with Donald Trump. That's the point, is that we've seen him operate with his own set of facts. And right now, Republicans are not holding him accountable for it. And independents are starting to give a little bit in some of the polling. But at the end of the day, people are seeing something being done in Washington. They know it may not be everything that they need. They know it may be a little unconstitutional, but they see movement, right? For the last 10, 15 years, nothing could get done. So right now they're behind it. But the fact of the matter is Donald Trump, all he needs is a little something. So he said he'll cut Social Security by $100 million, which we know is absolutely nothing in the budget. But that's a big number to people. And that's a savings. And that will resonate. In fact, Donald Trump has been winning the PR battle when it comes to the DOGE savings. And Democrats have been caught flat-footed. I think they're moving their message to an economic one, like eggs are still $12. $12 a dozen.
The facts are the facts are the facts, regardless of the message.
Not in Trump land.
I don't know that the Democrats have been left-footed. I mean, they're fighting back, and they're fighting back both in D.C. and in communities. What I do think is the case is that the answers won't come from D.C.
Right.
They do come. I think they will come locally, and you're starting to see a lot of Democrats really push back locally and try to organize locally around a lot of these issues. And so when you think about, to Susan's point, when you zoom out from all of this, right, the zoom out effect is that the majority of Americans have no idea the myriad of programs and agencies that make sure that their lives run smoothly every day. They don't have to think about it. But when you make all of these cuts and you close these agencies, they will have to start thinking about it, because it will start to affect their day-to-day lives. And that's when I think Democrats and independents and some of them Republicans maybe will be able to stop and say, this is why you had to change your life, and point to Donald Trump and Elon Musk for that.
Basil Smikle and Susan Del Percio, good to see you guys. Thank you so much.